So the reason why we pull you into this room, one is to just have us a little bit more in an intimate space, and it happens to be, look, they're not listening, I can't believe it. But anyway, it's basically to describe to you a little bit. But before I get to that, I'm going to do some thank yous myself, because there are plenty I need to do. I would like to thank Laura and the staff at Greenhill for asking me to curate a show. And then there are some specific people and events that took place along, I don't know, what are we, 20 months, 80 maybe, or something like that? I don't know, a year and a half or something, planning this, and so it just doesn't happen overnight. And if you can't see, come on in, come on in. It was my idea, so I want to make sure everybody's in here that can get in here. But if you're curating a show, which I'm not a curator, I'm a maker, and I'll get to that in a minute, you need somebody who's a very good curator, and that would be Edie Carpenter here at the Greenhill and her staff. And she allowed us to come in and kind of blow the place apart, lay out some things, and then fixed it for us, which I really appreciate you doing that. And when I came in, the lighting was something that I really was struck by. I was worried about the space and the amount of lighting, so I appreciate whomever did that. I don't know who that is. Susan's already been thanked, and she might be in the room now that I can get her to raise her hand. She's right there. It's great when you have you have an exhibition catalog, so you can have some record of it. And the other thing is great when you have a great designer to work with. And is Lauren here tonight?
Yes, somewhere.
Somewhere?
Hi.
So Lauren's on the staff here at Greenhill, and she was really instrumental at certain points of this experience. I want to thank her. And then all of our sponsors. And Laura's already mentioned Wingate, and I believe we have, I don't know what your...
A Life Property Management.
Yep. And you had a couple more.
The United Arts Council, the North Carolina Arts Council.
Yeah, I don't want to miss any of that. And so, and then I had two guys that really gave me a lot of assistance in the midst of this. And that's Dustin Farnsworth, who's in the exhibit, and Russell Gale. If they could both raise their hand. White shirt, clean Wranglers, and pink shirt, great plaid. Yeah. You can't do any of these things by yourself. And then the last thank you would go, well, second to last thank you would go to the artists who volunteered what I see as a lot of their time. A lot of times exhibitions are put on the backs of artists, so anything you can do as a patron of the arts to participate in sponsoring exhibitions, we greatly appreciate that. Because a lot of times it's just sort of assumed that that's what artists are dying to do again. They're mostly not. So thank you for doing that. And then I would like to thank my family, who are the cutest three people in the room. They're right there. The ones that are almost taller than her. So that's Cheryl, Stewart, and Maxwell. And they don't often attend these events, and so it's good that they're here. It's really good that they're here. Because a lot of times I'm somewhere else and I probably should be at home working, and I'm either in the studio or I'm doing something like a show like this, and it took a lot of time. So thanks for that. And I'm glad you're here, you can enjoy it. So why curate a show called Speaking in Species, and why bring you in this room to sort of demonstrate that point? The objects that are in this room, other than the ones that Edie added, that added the best extra part in this room, and they do the same exact thing I was trying to do. The objects in this room, for me, when we were setting up this room, kind of described what Melissa Engler, who's also in the show, told me tonight, that she was pleased with the show to see a range and an understanding of wood that she really didn't think of it. She did kind of allude to the fact, like, you're putting that with that? And so she wondered why I would do that, but when I tried it as a maker, remember, I'm not a curator, so I have no training in any of this, other than I make things, and I have some sense of design because I've made ugly things, and I know what good things look like, maybe. But mostly I look at nature. But this room actually was a place where I thought if a person came into the exhibit, they could experience that in the larger room, but they could also get into this space and really see the vast range in here. And so you'd see that if you're looking at Elizabeth's piece, who's standing right here, who I'm pleased to say I was lucky enough to be her teacher at one point. And then you look at Richard's piece. I mean, there's this great difference. And there's also other materials. I don't know if anybody knows that too, but sometimes the artists that I invite don't always stick to the rules. Big surprise there, right, Dave? Big surprise, Dave, right? Artist not sticking the rules. And then you got Joel's piece. So of those three pieces, you can see a complete range. Is Ilya here? But for me, as a sculptor, and my background is an MFA in sculpture, one of the most beautiful sculptural forms I know of is a Windsor chair. Now, when Ilya and I first talked about that, he looked like I was from Mars, I'm pretty sure, because he said, it's not sculpture, Brent, it's a chair. I'm like, I understand, but, you know, there's this really essential thing about this piece and this kind of work in wood that really is the complete one end of the spectrum for me when you think about putting this together a show like this, especially as it's in contrast with, you know, that's made out of wood too. So hopefully we would, as you walk through, one thing I would want you to do is, if you don't have a catalog, it's beautiful, but in the catalog I try to describe what might be this vast experience with wood that makers have, but really what the biggest experience I think they have that we all forget is that there's moments of transformation inside themselves. It's pretty much something we all take as makers for granted. When you can't make things and you have made things all your life, you start to think otherwise. So, but if you're not a maker and you walk through and you're looking at the wood and you're looking at this piece trying to figure out why is it made out of wood, why is it not made out of something else? In the case of something like this, there's a history. And there's an experience that is directly related to a set of tools. In a case like that, it's not that. It's actually form. It's about sculpture. And it could be made out of many different things. But just try to think about it in a different way maybe than you have thought of. And this is the second time I've done a show called Speaking in Species. And I'm looking for anybody to say, do you want to take it nationally? So if you're in the room, just please find me. But we did one in Michigan. It was about 7 artists there. And I kept trying to think of that show as a narrative show. And then what I realized is people didn't like their work being called narrative if they didn't think of it that way. Elizabeth, is your work narrative? Sometimes. See. So I didn't get a definitive answer. It was a lot easier. There were 7 artists. But we have over 60 pieces, I think, in the room. Is that right, Michelle? Yeah. So it's a lot of work. I want you to, if you have questions, and I think we should move into the bigger room, and maybe if you had a question, there's likely the artist standing in the room, because a lot of you came. If you're in the exhibition, if you could just raise your hand, appreciate it. Just hold it up a second, give you an difference. These people must be from Western North Carolina, gathered in the corner there. Is this the west corner? Like, so, what else did I better check my notes, because I didn't have some. So, one thing I wanted to tell you is that my limits as a curator are great. I don't mind telling you that. But then you ask, why not spend... I know Russell has 26 hours in this show that he will be compensated for. If he's got 26 in it, how many do I have? He said, well, you had your bike rack. You don't really have any more than 4 or 5, if I remember right. He could never say anything like that. But he has a considerable amount of time, and I have a considerable amount of time. And then you think of all the staff people in here. And so one thing is, why would you, as a maker, why wouldn't you spend that time just making things? And the reason I don't is because there's not enough of us that are makers, that advocate for makers. And what I mean by advocate is not that I'm on the street telling people about making things. I do that sometimes, though. But I am trying to get people to understand actually this moment of transformation that happens. And then I describe it a little bit in the catalog entry to sort of describe where these places might be, things that happen in these people's lives when they're making these things. And so if you could go through and also look at the exhibition through that eye, it would be a different place too. I think it's interesting to have a maker as a curator because, one, we come at it from a little bit different perspective. Sometimes a very reckless perspective, Edie will tell you, maybe. She wouldn't say that either, she's too nice. But you try to, I just try to put together, the other thing I would like to point out too, and this is without prying, because Dustin knows me as a very emotive guy, and he always accuses me of doing that. Doing pretty well tonight, huh? Is that most everyone in here, is Al Spicer here? So other than Al Spicer, I pretty much know everyone. well, how did you find out? Well, we can talk about that, but there's ways to look up people. They all have some connection to North Carolina. There's only 3 people, I think, that have work in the room that don't currently live in North Carolina. And that would be Robin Horn, Brad Reed Nelson, and Sylvia Rosenthal. And so, but they all have great ties to North Carolina, or to me, or to a place, a Penland or somewhere else like that. And I'm really honored as a curator to have my students in this show who've gone on to do much greater things than me. And I think there are only 2 of them here tonight. Elizabeth's one, and Dustin's another. Did I miss anybody? No. Tim Maddox would be another, but he's not here. So I just want you to know that as a maker, it's really an honor to be able to gather together a group. It is sort of like herding cats, as you could possibly expect. Yeah, anything you've ever heard about the non-professionalism of artists, you really understand when you become the curator. Just trust me. So if you need to apologize to me tonight, I'm accepting all apologies. No, without much more further than that, we'll go into the other room. If you have questions about a certain piece, then maybe we should just do it that way, and we can walk through the exhibit. Okay, yeah. So, hopefully you can visualize some of this stuff in your home. That's what I was hoping, actually, because when we were trying to contextualize it, there were things that were very diverse, adjacent to each other. And then there were certain viewpoints of the exhibition that you could actually understand the whole exhibition in one sight line. And that's kind of from out here. Edie really improved upon that, I think, by making some changes she made. But particularly this area over here happens to be one of my favorite areas. So, and it's because you can see it from the front door and everything kind of comes together. So it's not just that front room, it's the whole exhibit. I think it's best if we just tell them to enjoy themselves, enjoy all the food and have a drink. And become a member